In a review, we'll be speaking to Professor Karimi. She is a lecturer of international relations at the United States International University, Africa, and also associated with the Leeds University in the UK. Professor, many thanks for your time here on Bottomline Africa. A lot has been happening in the course of the week across the continent. Let's begin first with the latest situation in Somalia. We've had President Farmajo's term end about a week and a half ago. This past week, President Farmajo calling a crisis meeting with the leaders of federal states to chart the way forward. Still, there is gunfight and chaos reported in Somalia, with many saying the country could be going back into another civil war. What do you make of the situation, and what does it mean for the region and relations across the region?
Thank you, Michelle, for having me. Somalia is a very complicated situation. And as we know, as at the end of last year, Kenya and Somalia had some diplomatic tiff, where Somalia was accusing Kenya of interfering with its internal matters. And this has not been resolved yet. When the government is fighting against people who are supposed to be helping it, the only force that is benefiting here is Al-Shabaab, because they're growing stronger by the day, and the government is not necessarily it doesn't have enough forces to fight it. So when Al-Shabaab is growing, what we can only fear is that the infiltration into Kenya will mean now we have a security threat. Yes, I hope I have answered.
Yeah, let's talk about the African Union mission in Somalia. Many have questioned the fate of that now, with relations with Kenya already going downhill. The international community as well, the likes of the US withdrawing their troops from Somalia. How do you think this is likely to affect relations across the region with areas of interest like AMISOM between Somalia and Ethiopia, Somalia and Kenya?
We need to understand that the AU mandate is pretty much mirroring what the UN mandate is. The AU cannot interfere much with the internal affairs of a country. The only mandate they're given is to go and enforce peace or peacekeeping missions. So if the Somali government is not making headway in terms of what they had promised to do, then the AU has very little mandate in terms of enforcement. The only thing they can do is either add the troops or remove the troops. And now that the US troops have been withdrawn or redeployed elsewhere, we can only hope that the AU troops are enough to handle the crisis. If not, then Somalia will just break down into what they have always had, more civil war. The AU mandate is very limited. And I mean, it's only for it's applicable everywhere in all African states. They really cannot interfere and dictate what happens inside a country.
All right. What then can regional states do to assist in Somalia? There has been concern over the possible influx of refugees into neighboring countries, with Somalia, now further getting into a constitutional crisis. What further roles can the region play in terms of offering asylum and refugee status?
The international system operates on something called territorial integrity and sovereignty. You can't interfere with what goes on in another country unless they invite you to. So the neighboring countries can only help in terms of sending soldiers, like what we did with our KDF that were integrated into the mission, the AU mission. But apart from that, there's little they can do in terms of the internal state. But in terms of hosting refugees, Kenya has been a host to over 200,000 refugees. And we all know what that has done in terms of security. And there's an order some time ago to close the refugee camp at Dadaab because of the risk of insecurity in Kenya. And you know, our borders are quite porous. So the documentary that was done, I think by KTN some time ago, showing how porous our borders are. So in terms of hosting refugees, it is every person's right to seek asylum in any country they feel safer in. And it is the work of the UNHCR to ensure that people are placed properly in either a second state or a third state. So we really cannot reject refugees based on the security matters, security condition in Somalia. So that is the only option we have as neighboring states. But in terms of ensuring what goes on in Somalia, there's little the neighbors can do.
All right, and of course, apart from the situation in Somalia, the situation in Uganda has been unfolding this week as well. Opposition candidate Bobi Wine, they're saying he is losing faith in the court system where he did file a dispute over the presidential elections. He also has spoken about the human rights violations, abductions and killings of members of the opposition. Again, what is your analysis of the situation in Uganda, especially when it comes to human rights violations?
They're only alleged human rights violations because the government, of course, will deny. There has been reports by the EU mission that there has been gross violation of human rights. NGOs have been kicked out in the name of that they're funding terrorism. Basically, the media has been shut down, so what we're hearing is just rumors and allegations, so we can't prove that there's a violation of human rights. But indeed, we know there has been, especially in regards to Bobi Wine and him being enclosed in his home during immediately after the elections. And of course, the opposition has faced quite a number of problems in regards to now them campaigning and all. So we can't ascertain for sure. There's no media outlet that will come out and say there has been gross violations, but international bodies like the EU has highlighted this. It is typical, it's almost becoming typical of most African countries that have dictators that do not want to let go of power to actually use violations of human rights to keep power. Do we see any I honestly feel horrible for Bobi Wine because he's trying the best he can. When he goes to court, of course, half the bench is known to Museveni in one way or another. Some of them are relatives. So it's like the Kenyan system when you're told file imepotea, the file is lost. And it's frustrating for him. And I don't think he'll get justice in court, really. So it's only, but on the other hand, either way, he has won in terms of he has actually managed to fight a system that has been in place for a very long time. So in the hearts of Ugandans, he has actually, he has endeared himself as someone who has tried to free Uganda from dictatorship. But legally, I don't think his case will go anywhere, and we can only hope that he'll live to fight another day.
All right, and of course, we watch as that unfolds. Also still happening is the response to COVID-19. There has been a lot of backlash on African leaders of their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, at least in some countries. I've seen South Africa getting the vaccine, which they say might not work. But let's begin with Tanzania, where there seems to be a surge in COVID-19 cases. The administration of President Magufuli seemingly still in denial of the same. And many have actually come out to say that this could be a human rights violation, not allowing Tanzanians to access proper health care for COVID-19. Your thoughts on how this is unfolding?
Tanzania is a very interesting case. They're actually not saying they have a COVID crisis, they're saying they have a problem with pneumonia. There's a similarity between pneumonia and COVID symptoms, so you really can't tell what they're talking about. But Tanzania has squashed all efforts to help the country, with the president being in the forefront of saying that there's no COVID in Tanzania, Mungu mbele, that God has cleansed Tanzania of COVID. And of course, if there's no COVID in Tanzania, there's no need for a vaccine for them. They believe that God has healed them. There's no problem with having faith like that. But when you're putting the population in danger, then it is indeed a gross violation of human rights. The international system can intervene, but again, remember the clause I mentioned, sovereignty and territorial integrity. You can't interfere with what's happening there. So the best they can do is Tanzanians are beginning to face some sanctions in terms of travel, and people traveling to Tanzania are beginning. They're being stopped from traveling to Tanzania. So the economy of Tanzania actually is going to struggle and suffer because, of course, most African countries depend on tourism, imports, exports. So the economy is going to take a hit in Tanzania. But that aside, the fact that he's unwilling to admit, of course, it would be shameful for him to now come out and say that there's a problem with COVID, despite there being rumors again. And most characteristic of Uganda and Tanzania is that you squash the media to the point that everything that comes out becomes a rumor. So you really can't confirm, because the last test they did, I think, was in April 2020. That's the last time they released any COVID results. And they have continually said that there's no COVID in Tanzania, despite us all knowing that there's a problem. Internally, when you ask people there, some of them will give you glowing reports of how people are coping, they're fine, while others will say that there's a problem, people are dying, so we really cannot tell exactly what's going on. But Tanzania is just being stubborn, I believe.
All right, and let's finish very briefly with what Africa is expecting from U.S. President Joe Biden. He will this week address several issues touching on U.S. foreign policy, and many are eager to see what his refugee policies are touching on Africa. We saw him reverse several, bans like Trump's Muslim ban, and Nigeria came off that list. What should Africa expect, and what should Africa ask for?
Well, Africa has been facing the heat with the Trump administration, with us being called vulgar names. We have seen ourselves being put on the side traveling to the U.S. has not been the same since the former President Trump took power. But now Biden has come with a policy that is reviewing. He's not saying he's trashing what Trump has done, but he's saying it in a diplomatic way, that he's now reviewing bad policies. And that can only mean good things for Africa, because a lot of our citizens of Africa in general who are being denied entry for one reason or another, especially from the Muslim background, which was quite unfair. So now he's reviewing policies to ensure that immigrants now get, a lot of them get status, and that the immigration policies are now lenient towards Africans, because we all know that a lot of us go there for studies or for work or one thing or another. And the American economy is built on immigrants, and that's a fact. So when you stop immigrants from going into America, then you're basically affecting the economy. And countries like Canada have realized the value of immigrants, and that's why they'll invite them in numbers. But so we can only expect that there's going to be fairness, and there's going to be there's going to be justice, and especially in terms of the rights of immigrants. And Africa can only ask for fairness in terms of relocation and living standards of immigrants. And we're not addressing the illegal ones, the ones who run there for, after crime and all that. I'm talking about legal people who can actually get status in America. So those are the people that will actually benefit from Biden's administration being lenient and being more friendly. And he's talking about supporting dreamers. And a lot of Africans do dream about living in the United States.
All right. That is Professor Christine Karimi. Professor, thank you so much for your time. She is a lecturer of international relations at USIU, also associated with the Leeds University in the UK. And finally, designer Rebecca Minkoff recreated an indoor botanical garden for her latest line at the New York Fashion Week. In one of the events,